Wow. Well, one thing that stands out to me is the 80s fashions.
Yes.
What was do you have a favorite like 80s fashion that you loved back then? And I mean, they were so
I loved
unique.
it. I loved what was going on with the Allison look. I love the goth thing. Love the long sweaters and the high tops and the kind of gender fluid sort of look that was happening around at least what I was doing. But also, I mean, the 80s were very high fashion, right? Everybody's hair suddenly got really big.
Totally.
Seeing some of these pictures, oh my God, everyone's hair was just huge.
Lots of neon colors,
yes.
Acid wash, everything.
Yes.
Were you into like music, like quote unquote goth music that, like The Cure and Depeche Mode, like stuff you would think that Allison would listen to?
I love The Cure. I was listening to a lot of David Bowie when we were doing the movie. For some reason, it was an Allison thing. It was a lot of for Allison. It was some of the grunge stuff coming in a little bit, like the 80s version of that. But it was Allison was a lot of classic rock, I gotta say. A lot of stuff from the late 70s. Maybe it was the 80s when she was still listening to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any styles from the 80s that you could just do without? Like, would it be the big hair, or is there something that sticks out of like, why did we ever do this?
I think the hair got too big at a certain point. At a certain point, I think there was too much hair everywhere. Just too much. The rock music and then the act, everywhere you went, somebody had this enormous. There was too much hairspray in the 80s. How about that?
That's a very valid point. What about how was working with John Hughes? I mean, you hear so much about John Hughes. Like, what was it really like to work with him?
He was lovely. I only had the one experience with him as a director. I worked with him again where he was a producer years later, but as a director, I loved him. I felt trusted by him. That's a huge thing because a lot of the time working on a film, there's not always a feeling of being trusted by the director. Right. In that case, absolutely. He didn't want to change anything about me at all. He let me figure out with him the way that Allison would look. And there are all sorts of little improv-y things in there that I just felt free to make things up. Her physicality or this or that or the other thing, I felt safe. Hard to describe, but I think everyone did. And John would, the cameras would, everything was different back then, but he would sit right on a little box right underneath the camera. So it was almost like he was in the scene with us, and he would laugh and he would love it. And it felt like we were this circle and he was in there, even though he wasn't on camera. He wasn't in another room watching something on a monitor or doing something like that. Do you know what I mean? He was always right in there. And some of the improvs in that movie just came from his particular sense of humor and the freedom that he gave all of us.
That's so interesting that you were able to like kind of craft the look and like the backstory and a lot of that.
Yes. And the costume designer, Marilyn Vance, was also super open and creative and fun. He somehow or other, Ned Tannen was producer on it. Somehow they put together this group of people that were just not controlling, that were open and creative. And I think that's part of what you get in the movie. You can feel that. I didn't feel like somebody was trying to control anything. Wow. There was liberation in it.
That's awesome. I know you said recently, like the one thing like you did disagree with John on, and like that was the most uncomfortable part for you was like at the end when like Allison like put the bow in her hair and put on makeup. Walk me through that.
So that was in the script. She gets transformed into this sort of like princess thing happening. I I don't feel like that was a necessary thing in the script, but it was part of the it was part of the 80s, you know, sort of rom-com kind of thing that was going on. I think he agreed with me. So this was more of a thing where this was something that the studio wanted and he had written it. But he let me, I had all this black eyeliner on and things for Allison that were part of what she would look like, was armor, right? And he did let me change it so that Molly is actually taking some of that heavy duty, you know, scary makeup off of Allison. So I was trying to think of it as more of like an uncovering. Do you know what I mean? She takes off that enormous black sweater and suddenly, you know, there's an actual person in there. Something about being able to come out of the hiding, really, that she had. There, so to get an element of that in, and he really did go there with me. It was much more of a makeover thing when it was originally written. So it did evolve.
That makes sense. And that really was where Allison kind of ended up, that we saw. I mean, she kind of stripped away the armor of her.
Yeah,
show.
I got the hair out of the face and, you know, just suddenly start to see this person emerge from what did feel to me like armor. But at the same time, you know, aesthetically, I like the armor better. So what are you going to do?
Who doesn't like us? I'm all about the goth look. So yes, check yes. What about like Breakfast Club is such a beloved movie by so many people, but you know, then like it has fallen under these like criticisms, like these themes of like, you know, sexism and misogyny and, you know, like just in the relationships between the characters. Like, what do you think of that? And like, how does it stand up today?
Yeah, I think there are some cringe moments in it. I haven't seen it, mind you, for a very, very long time. Yeah, I think there are definitely, I know that there are moments that are like sexist and questionable, and that's what I mean. Like there is this very dated kind of thing, very 80s dated, that's in that movie, which is, again, I haven't seen it for years, but it is one of the things that surprises me about people still loving it even now. So somehow it manages to rise above that crap. I don't know how, or I don't know. But yes, to answer your question, yes, true. That is actually, that is an aspect of the movie that's problematic.
Yes. And that's kind of like, in a way, why it's such a great movie, because like it's problematic and you know it, but like it still is so beloved. Like you watch this and you're like, it's brilliant. You know what I mean? And like the performances are brilliant. You're like, it's just an interesting dichotomy. Yeah.
It's a mixed bag. Yeah.
It's such an interesting dichotomy. What about, I mean, I know you've been open about this in the past, like when something like that like spills over into your real life, like I know you've said early on in your career, you were basically told like to change everything about yourself to like survive in Hollywood and have a career. And you tried to work with a certain makeup artist and, you know, talk to me about that.